is Angie. I'm on the phone.
Larry Smith is on the phone.
Ellen Hagan's on the phone.
Call roll officially.
Who was that?
Ellen Hagan, I think. Hagan?
Ellen Hagan.
You can go ahead and get it started.
Well, we'll call the meeting to order. Thanks for coming in this morning, despite the risks of getting together. Have a roll call, please.
Trace Kendig. Patrick Updike.
Present on the phone.
Peter Huffman.
Here.
Cindy Hike. Tom Lampy. He's here.
Yeah, we heard him before.
Blake DeRucci.
Here.
Present on the phone.
Annette Dunn. Wendy Hess. Andy Buffington.
Here.
Ellen Hagan on the phone.
Present on the phone.
Michelle Bischoff.
Present.
David Ness.
Here.
Rob Rotter.
Here.
Jason Schlutenhofer.
Here.
Did I get it right?
Yep, pretty good.
Close enough.
Yeah.
Carolyn Smith.
Here.
Larry Smith.
Present on the phone.
And Angela Klauser.
Present on the phone.
And we do have a quorum.
Thank you. Start at the end, Blake, with introductions.
Blake DeRucci, Iowa Homeland Security and Emergency Management, 911 Program Manager.
Rob Rotter, Iowa County Sheriff.
Carol Lunsmith, Iowa Law Enforcement Academy.
Dave Ness, Des Moines Police, Municipal.
Chris Myers on the SWIC. Peter Huffman, Iowa Department of Transportation.
Michelle Bischoff, Des Moines Fire.
Jason Slutenhofer, Wright County Sheriff.
Andy Buffington, Winnebago, and Hancock County Emergency Management Communications.
Folks on the phone. Tom, were you on?
Tom Lampy, DPS.
Larry?
Patrick Updike, Iowa Department of Corrections.
Thank you.
Larry Smith, Kika County Emergency Management.
Angela Klauser, Panorama Schools, member at large.
Ellen Hagan, Joe Fire and Rescue, representing volunteer firefighters.
I think that's everyone. Thank you. Entertain a motion for today's agenda.
So moved.
Bischoff, in a second.
Second.
Thank you, Peter. Approval of today's minute.
All in favor.
All in favor? Thank you.
Aye.
A little ahead of myself there. Approval of today's minutes. I'll entertain a motion. Or of the minutes from February 13th, rather.
Buffington,
So
so
moved.
moved.
Buffington and Smith. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion pass. Swickmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So a couple of updates for everybody. Started on status board last month with a big demo, so we'll kind of carry that through here today. Quick update on that program. We did get it installed on DPS servers. We've been working through getting things oriented with that. There were several steps to get all that taken care of, and that is all set. One of the things that we were trying to fix was getting the email notifications off the ground for end users. Email notifications are nice because if we set up a new account, we can actually shoot them an email saying, hey, your account's been created. Or if we have to change a password for you or something like that, it shoots them the temporary password. The good news is that as of today at 09:30, email notifications were working. So we've made some good progress with that. That puts us right in line to start the pilot program for this in the next couple of weeks. We're shooting around, right around a dozen or so PSAPs is what we're hoping to get. We took our initial list of PSAPs that were interested and sent out emails the other day to those agencies to make sure they were still interested, and if so, how many user accounts they wanted, and getting them all fired up for them. Once everything is spun up, we will host a training webinar for the status board program, and that'll be for those pilot PSAPs to attend and ask questions and get familiar with the functionality. In addition, we're going to do a small demonstration of it at the NINA conference, I believe is when I present next month. So we'll be working on that. We're still well on target for our Q2 2020 release. We're kind of ahead of the schedule I thought we may be on at this point, so that's also good because in reality, how many times does government run on time and under budget? So this is good. Quick update for you on some standard stuff relative to TIA, TR8, and the ADIS group for JLMR LTE. With respect to TR8, I'm awaiting on some new voting instructions for some standards that are up for approval. These would be addendums to existing standards to clarify a few things. Website issues prevented me from actually accessing the documents for a thorough review of all the changes and even what was up for ballot at that one given time, so I can't even really tell you what I was supposed to be reviewing because I couldn't get to it. Once that is fixed, I will give a report out to the board on what I was expected to review and how things went with that. Hopefully that'll be fixed in the next week or so. As far as the ADIS group and JLMR LTE, that's kind of the concept of the merging ecosystem with LMR and LTE. We've relayed some stuff that is being done in that group to the standard or the technology committee. They recently took that up for discussion and are working on a work product document for the board. Chair Updike can cover that in his report. As far as some initiatives that began in January with the Shared System Study Group, we met for the first time yesterday. It was a pretty solid meeting overall. We had the various membership discuss what they had actually hoped to accomplish with these meetings. And the unique thing is that what they wanted to accomplish wasn't necessarily all technology. We also had them voice their thoughts on what they had heard an ISSI or CSSI could do or what it couldn't do. Several commonalities arrived amongst all the responses, and really we kind of got off on a little bit of a side topic, but it's going to be beneficial because we're going to end up taking a deep dive into the SAFECOM continuum and how interoperability can actually function with respect to that definition, because there's several components to it. If you remember our skip, there's the governance piece, there's the training, there's the technology, there's the SOPs and policies, and then also usage. So there's key components you have to understand when you're looking at a situation like this that can be as complex as a shared systems setup. So as a final topic, we set our meeting cadence to monthly, and it looks like the next session is going to be in Dallas County. We're going to set it up so that as we go around the state and take these meetings to various locations, we're going to cover our necessary business and then also tour the comm centers to see what they actually have there for equipment, because sometimes actually getting to look, see, and touch what people have for equipment helps you understand what they're encountering, and it can help better define the problem and outline a path to a solution. So that's where we ended up yesterday with that. We are looking at scheduling some more sessions with PSAPs for consulate and control station training. We can cover that in outreach. As far as myself goes, I've had some more PSAPs contact me about one-on-one sessions. I would encourage them to keep on doing that. We can easily bring in someone from state radio or other users, nearby troopers, to kind of discuss how the system is being used and how the PSAP can leverage it to their advantage. If anybody wants that, again, just let me know. That's my report for the meeting. I'll take any questions.
Any questions for the SWIC? Hearing none, we'll move on to user group. Chair Buffington. Oh, sorry, Blake, I skipped you. Thank you. Go ahead.
From the 911 program, the council did meet prior to this meeting, provided updates on the upcoming integration, the migration of the wireline 911 network onto the next generation 911 network. That remains on schedule. Really going to start that. Those cutovers, PSAP by PSAP, starting in May, hoping to conclude in August. So that remains on schedule, other than a couple paperwork pieces of items from some of the PSAPs, but we're working on that as well. More timely, provided a bit of an update on the COVID-19 response. For those that aren't aware, from our department's perspective, the State Emergency Operations Center has been activated in response to that pandemic. We did send out the Department of Public Health recommendation to PSAPs for screening callers that might think they are impacted by COVID-19. So that was sent out probably 2 weeks ago now and has not been updated since then. Not sure if Public Health is looking to do so or not. Of course, if there is any updates, we'll send updated screening questions out statewide as well. We also provided, actually just today, this was a good question, HIPAA guidance for PSAPs as well. There was some concerns about transmitting private patient information and how you get that information out to EMS. Basically, the bottom line, and again, this went out in detail, but basically the bottom line is that information needs to be transmitted somehow. And it's really up to you locally to figure out your best method of doing that, if it's over open airways or a more private method. But information obtained at the PSAP level needs to get out if it's related to COVID-19. So really that's my report for 911. Any questions?
Thank you. Chair Buffington?
Yeah, thank you. The user group committee scheduled a meeting for 3 weeks ago. During that meeting, Vice Chair Dennert and I had a nice one-on-one conversation, so we didn't have a meeting. So we scheduled one for last Thursday to make sure that we could sort through the applications. That's all the business that we conducted at our meeting last week. So you'll see under new business, number 21, there will be 8 new applications to consider and hopefully approve here this afternoon, this morning. And that's all of my report. Any questions?
Chair Buffington?
Yes.
I do have one for you. I think back, it's been about a year since we revamped how we do the applications and we do the process form now. Has that been working out okay with the extra paperwork?
I love extra paperwork. Yeah, thank you.
But as far as
Yes,
getting the
it
loading
does.
analysis done?
I mean, obviously, our biggest concern from the user group level is the technical side from the vendor, Motorola, doing loading analysis. Because really, we want to put ourselves in a position at the user group committee to say yes to applicants, or at least be able to dig a little bit deeper. So when Motorola says there's not a loading issue or a technology issue, obviously the members of the user group committee feel a lot more comfortable in passing that off to the board to making the recommendation to approve.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Heard a couple clicks on the phone here over the last few minutes. Any other board members able to join us today on the phone that were not previously announced? Hearing none, we'll move on to the Finance Committee. Chair Hagan, are you still on?
I am on. Our monthly expenditures during February for the Interoperable and Broadband Communications System Fund were $8,611. That leaves a February balance of $155,759. Monthly expenditures during February for the Slick P 2.0 were $13,152. Of that amount, $10,522 were federal expenditures. The remaining federal amount available from the grant is $352,895. The Slick P 2.0 grant has been extended to March 31st, 2021. Does the board have any questions regarding the activities or financial position?
Hearing none.
That's my report.
Excellent, thank you. Governance, Peter?
Sure. We met on March 2nd this month, and the discussion largely revolved around a policy that was proposed by the Technology Committee dealing with how we should interface with particularly cell phone companies that have deployable towers, and how that might interfere with LMR radio. We made some minor edits to what we think the language should look like, and we'll meet again next month and decide whether or not to move forward, although I think it's likely, considering that it was viewed favorably by consensus.
So was it referred back to them, or is it still in governance, or do you know?
Still in governance,
Okay.
and we'll make that decision about referring it back to the Technology Committee to make sure we didn't modify the language in such a way that it changes the intent that they had, and then we'll move it forward to the board for approval.
Chair Hoffman, for the next governance call, to ensure that there's some alignment with the policy and maybe save some time, do you think it'd be beneficial to have Chair Updike or a representative from the Technology Committee on the call also to say, hey, this is kind of, it's still within the vision and concept for the policy, and give their blessing during the meeting?
Sure, absolutely. And it does help that I'm also on the Technology Committee.
It does.
Thanks both. Operations Committee, Chair Bischoff?
Yes, the Operations Committee has met since our last meeting, and the primary substance of conversation is the development of a policy and development and review of a policy that would allow for sub-regional talk groups. We are working through that process of having both the draft policy and a draft application, so all committees that review the policy can see it in context. The Des Moines metro area is being used as the applicant for review, and that process is moving forward. We should have that completed within a week and then out to all of the committee chairs for review. Any questions in regards to operations?
Any committee in particular that you envision that this needs to run through?
It
or
needs to
it'll
go
just
through, the way the policy is currently drafted, it would go through user group and potentially technology if the application includes any gadgets, gizmos, what's-its to be added to the system, and operations. Those potential three, always two, but potential three.
Excellent, thank you. Any other questions for the chair? Thanks for your report. Ellen, back to you with outreach.
The Outreach Committee continues to send out all the information that we receive, as in past reports. Thank you.
Thank you. Sean, you're up. FirstNet Outreach Specialist Sean Wagner.
Well, this should be brief. We still anticipate having the March 24th Region 3 training. I know there's a lot of scares going on right now, but as far as I know, we still have every intention of still holding that March 24th event. I would think that if we do hear anything different, we'll be telling everyone. I do know that government travel has been limited, and our FirstNet contact from firstnet.gov, Kyle Richardson, will be attending either remotely or via video due to government travel restrictions currently. Other than that, I've been working to make some small tweaks on the Isicsb application website, and that is what I have currently there for FirstNet Outreach.
Any questions? Thank you. Chair Carol Lund Smith with the Training Committee.
I can handle it. So, Carol wasn't able to make the call. So, the big topic of discussion at this point is getting our the Isicsb regional training set up, which Sean kind of touched on that. We're still having that session in Region 3 on the 24th. We're working on finalizing some of the logistics on the Region 1 training. That'll be in Ames, and the likely target date for that is April 22nd. As I mentioned before, we're still accepting requests for one-on-one training as well. We're going to have an additional meeting in Region 2 in Charles City. That date has a new date, and that is April 16th. There was some conflicts with APCO and NINA that we tried to avoid to ensure that we didn't put people in an awkward spot of going to those beneficial conferences or having Isicsb training, so we worked to get that rescheduled. As far as the rest of our TA submissions go with ICTAP, ECD, and CISA, we've had a couple of meetings. Just to refresh, we were approved for a COML, a COMT, an encryption TA, SOP development, and a COMEX. The SOP development course is set up and scheduled for March 24th. That's at HSEMD facilities in Windsor Heights. Sign-up has been set up online for that. We're going to set up a follow-up call tomorrow or next week for the rest of the TAs to try to get as much logistics with those sorted out as possible. The first thing we're going to line up for the immediate sessions would be our encryption TA. This is likely going to turn into 2 sessions, which I think is a good thing. One will be a webinar for decision makers. Think your county sheriffs, think your police chiefs, think your communications lieutenants and things like that, the ones that are designed or in a position to make decisions for their agencies on how they would want to deploy their comms and also possibly encryption. It's designed to help them get oriented with what the technology and terminology means and what it does, so that they can make the best possible decision they can with the information that's presented. Following that webinar, and we're going to try to structure it so that it's the webinar and then 2 weeks later it's the actual in-person session, to give those decision makers a chance to go home, ask their technology people what they think, and then send their technology people to the in-person meeting at DPS headquarters where they will discuss actually how to make the nuts and bolts work with encryption. That'll help, I think, us as a state, because encryption's come up not only here pretty profusely over the last couple of years, it's come up nationwide. And I think that'll help us sort out through some of the logistics that are associated with it, the technology situations and coordination that has to be resolved, and put us in a better spot overall for interoperability. We're going to be working on identifying some locations for the ComL and the ComT. We will be also working on other logistics for the ComX that we're looking at having sometime later this year. It's highly possible that ComX will be likely late summer, and we'll go from that. One last training session that we recently had was in Council Bluffs for the consulates and PSAPs. I'll double back a little bit. Apologize for the scatterbrainness of that report. Almost forgot. We had about 30-some people there. Was it, Holly? 35 roughly? Really well attended. It worked well. Showed them kind of the nuts and bolts of how to use their control stations and consulates. We got a lot of good questions and a lot of tough questions, which was excellent. Gave them a preview of status board as well when it was still in the developmental staging server. And we also had a lot of good solid questions answered on pursuits, things like that. What do I do if I see this? What's my reaction to that action or situation? And a lot of that was covered. Luke Erpelding was there to assist with that, did a phenomenal job training those operators, just like Robbie Johansson has for the other training sessions we've conducted. David Barnett and Kyle Richardson were there also to cover FirstNet and kind of give people an idea on how things look with that currently. That'll be the report for the training committee. I'll go ahead and take any questions.
Thank you. Technology committee, Chair Updike, are you still on?
Yes, the Technology Committee met on February 27th and March 3rd. Going back in time a little bit, we're still looking at the VCall 10 frequency for PSAP. An update on that, we're still working. One of our technology members is doing some research on the potential coordination issues that could arise by trying to license that frequency in at least 99 locations in the state of Iowa. So I'm waiting on that person to present that information to me. It sounds like it's going to be pretty interesting what he finds out. The next thing that was addressed is the Technology Committee is working on a technical recommendation for smartphone applications that could potentially be used to interface with the Isicsb system. So that's a work in progress. Once that gets drafted, we'll push that out to everybody on the board so that they can look at it and then eventually come back and make a full-fledged recommendation on that. And the last item is what Mr. Huffman spoke of earlier, a policy for deployables where LTE could potentially interfere with LMR systems. I'm hoping he sends that back to the Technology Committee so we can look at it, and then hopefully after that we can present that for a 30-day comment period. And that's all I have. Chris, do you want to expand on any of that?
No, I think you covered it pretty well. More or less, we're just trying to be proactive in preventing any potential problems, but yet not precluding anybody from doing something that they want to do. And I think that'll basically do what we hope it will. So, yeah.
I would like to add that the policy regarding the deployables will be sent back to the Technology Committee before it moves on.
Quick question for any of the three of you. smartphone app you referenced, is that a vendor specific? Is that through, you know, a Harris Motorola type provider, or is it a third party that would be vendor agnostic, or?
Right now, most of the apps that are out there that'll interface directly with the system are vendor specific. There have been some working sessions done on trying to create a pathway so that you could use different apps, but it requires different things as far as gateways, various other processes to try to connect the two together. Some work well, some don't. Some have caused problems in other states that we would like to avoid. I won't name names on that, but they have. You got to be really careful with that technology, more or less, and that's what the committee's trying to figure out, is where's that happy medium.
Yeah. The most promising, I would assume, are the vendor-developed ones.
They're the most feature
furthest along, perhaps.
Yeah, they're the most furthest along, and they're the most feature-rich at this point too.
Okay. Excellent report. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you.
FirstNet Broadband, Chair Bischoff.
Yes, the FirstNet Broadband Committee met this week and just continued to build relationships with both the .gov and the .com. We shared our experience of going to Boulder and visiting the both visiting with FirstNet Gov and with the Center for Public Safety Research, and seeing what is in the future, 5 to 10 years down the road. We had the opportunity to share a lot of things that would make our lives better, pointing out to them that it would be great if they could work on day-to-day things that we interact with on a daily basis, as opposed to dealing with things that we encounter once or twice in a career. For example, they were quite proud of the efforts that they had put into triaging and tagging and being able to track a patient from disaster through hospitalization. Though very, very important to have tracking mechanisms to do that, we are unable in the fire industry to track a drug that we deal with every day from the moment we receive the prescription until it is wasted or administered to a patient. So just kind of trying to refocus them on things that we interact with every day, as opposed to the catastrophic, huge things, though important, maybe not the best place to put efforts until we have some of the day-to-day solutions in place. So it was a great opportunity. They loved getting that feedback, and we were able to actually see 3Q PPP in place, which was phenomenal, that they've got a lab set up that can overload a cell system and actually see priority and preemption with phones that we're holding in our hands. So it was, rather than just hearing the presentations and being explained, to actually witness it was pretty incredible.
Any questions? Hearing none, we'll move on to the LEA committee. Connie?
We continue to get our updates from the operation committees for anything that impacts the LEA committee, so we can kind of work hand in hand. The two areas that we're focusing on is first the co-location sites. And right now we're continuing to get notifications from the carriers on the status of the orders that we've sent to them. As of today, we have 4 tower sites that are fully migrated over to the microwave systems. That's Underwood, Storm Lakes, Cedar Falls, and Woodward. We are also preparing a matrix to monitor the LEA traffic and utilization for all the tower sites. What this means is that when we get to the phase 2 that are not co-located, we're going to know what sites are actually being used and which ones are not. Then that goes into the next area of the control stations, training, and installation. Swick Myers keeps us informed on the status of the control stations, and the training is going to go hand in hand with that utilization, because before we can migrate anything from those non-co-located sites, or if we're able to even keep them running until November, we will know which PSAPs are still using them, which ones have been trained. So right now we're in the phase where we're trying to make sure that everybody that is still using LEA is trained, the installation's done, and they're comfortable. We're also developing some maps and some matrix to identify all those subject matters, the training, installation, and testing. So that's about where we're at. Is there any questions?
Thank you.
Sheriff Rotter, do you have anything else to add?
No, I think you did a fine job.
Thank you.
All right, opportunity for other reports, information sharing from board members. Michelle?
I have something. Just wanted to inform the board that there will be a device added to the core that is at Motorola's expense to allow for the APX Next, which is Motorola's next version of APX radios, to fully function with those added features. It has some enhancements that don't currently exist on an APX that require a device to make it all work. So I just wanted the board to be aware that that is occurring. So any Isicsb users that move to the APX Next radio, that piece is in place.
Excellent. Also, I wanted to briefly mention a piece of legislation that came up a few weeks ago and then seemed to go by the wayside. And there's some rumblings that it may come back, or portions of it might. And that was a bill Representative Thorup brought forward, House File 2540. And again, this had kind of fallen off the radar. So I haven't reviewed it closely, but recently. But it seems like there was focus on moving Isicsb from DPS DOT to Homeland Security. I'm going to just mention a few of the more significant aspects as I recall. There was a mention that board membership of Isicsb should change. Very specifically, that would leave some people out, would allow other people on. There was some mention of legacy tower prohibition against shutting off legacy equipment or tower sites. And then one that caught my eye was each officer should determine, or could determine independently, what frequencies, talk groups, and so forth would go into their individual radio. So several of these things were concerning to me, personally, just being responsible for helping to set up one agency. I can only imagine how that would be managed across different departments in the state and so forth. But anyway, just wanted you to be aware that although the bill in total did not pass the funnel, there still seems to be rumblings in particular about a membership and some other portions of this that could potentially be added to other bills as a addendum or rider. So just stay tuned, I guess. Also wanted to give a shout out to Swickmeyer on the annual report that for people that are new to the board or people that haven't had time to read it, it's, sometimes it seems like we get together once a month and we're slogging through the same issues and they take some time. But when you take an annual look at what has been accomplished over the last year, it's in the last few years, it's really phenomenal. So I'd encourage you, if you haven't had an opportunity to read that, I know we're all busy, but especially as it may relate to the progress that's being made on the system, and then as it may also relate to some of the issues that were proposed as part of this legislation. So any other comments from board members?
I do have.
Sure.
Just a heads up, we had a situation last weekend, Friday into Saturday, dealing with a manhunt, a standoff situation. And we're trying to schedule a debrief for that coming up next week, but it involved 11 different agencies, between 40 and 50 responders. It was
a lot of patching in between the Isicsb system and Sarah. And my initial on that is that communications was not an issue. Things went well there. We may find out some little idiosyncrasies that popped up, but it was actually pretty amazing to have that many agencies working on two different systems and still communications was not a problem. So hopefully next month I'll be able to give you a little bit more details of what went right and what went wrong with that as far as communications goes, but just a heads up that that's coming.
That would be rare. I don't know if I've ever heard of an after action where communications was not an issue.
Right.
So I hope that in fact is the case. Chris?
Yeah, just a quick, if I may double back to 2450 for a second.
Yeah.
If you remember, we had a Nick Swick interoperability marker session in Little Rock last year. Reported out here. That was when I sent out that big spreadsheet with all the green markings on it and stuff like that, or where are we in initial stages, or where are we kind of there, or where we optimized. The way our board is structured and the way our committees are set up and our governance structure in general, including our processes for handling issues, documents, creating policies, standards, and even the makeup of our board, having to go through the governor's office, that vetting process that's associated with that, the membership taking the initiative to apply for the board, that is viewed as the best practice nationally. So from that perspective, we're doing a lot of things really well, and it would be probably good to vocalize that in some way, shape, or form if we could.
Excellent. Tom, did I hear you trying to jump on to Chair Lampy?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
So I would like to just comment on the bill itself, and as your chair, I'd like to let you know that Dave and I will be having a meeting next week with some folks, and hopefully all our legislators that are on the board to discuss that legislation and any future amendments or something that could be added to change the makeup of the board. But here's what I truly believe. Back in 2007, Bob Kresick, our representative, along with Tom Hancock, established the bill that drove the board to where it's at today. But they're very proud of that, Bob is, and that was given a careful analysis and thought when that makeup was made. And as Chris stated, that is a common practice across the state's best practice, and I'm not so sure that's probably where they formed it and got that information from. But when it comes to annual reports, we submit one every year and have been since 2007. But I will tell you, if you haven't read that report this last time, and even the one before, you need to read that, and you will get a great analysis of where we've been, where we've came, and where we're headed. And that report itself is 100 and some pages. However, the first 30 are the key. Now, we send that over every year to the legislature, but I would hope that they read it, and I would hope that report right now will come into play as a valuable piece of information, because I truly believe when we have legislation like this and proposed, that it's a lack of communication on someone's part. Because when you look at that report and all the work that this board has done and where we've been and where we are headed, I don't see why you would see it's not working. I believe it is. That's my opinion. You've all done the work, but read that report. And for all the ones that we've submitted, this is probably one of the most valuable ones that we're going to have that has been submitted. It's an astonishing report that, Chris, the way it flows, the way all the work and all the committees, 55 policies developed, that's unheard of. That's a lot of hard work. Those are also developed off best practices in the country. So that's how we work. Everything's fair and equal, and everybody has to say. The other thing that I'd like to see, if you want to get involved with the board, I would encourage more people get involved in the committees. We have 6 RICs, 8 standing committees. If anything needs to be changed, you could add more standing committees to our bylaws. You could add the RICs to our bylaws. That's where the work gets done. That's where the stuff comes up through. Board membership is one thing, but committee membership is important because that's where the work is done. and I'll take any questions or comments, but I'm going to lose my voice here, so. I don't have the virus, I just have it. I'll be back to work tomorrow.
We appreciate you calling in today. Thank you.
Yeah, I bet you do.
Excellent comments. Anything else? Board information sharing. And we'll jump to Melvin, Motorola Project Manager. Melvin's strolling up here like he's been part of the success and the accomplishments over the last year.
Good morning, and I'm here in person. So, as I mentioned before, these reports keep on getting smaller and smaller. So, as you can tell, my little notepad is actually pretty small, which is a good thing. We just have a couple of things. A lot of things are not that different. The first thing I want to mention is the Hardin site. So we haven't had any change on that, so we continue to wait. We've made multiple attempts to move that forward. We have had some exchanges between September and now, but we're still waiting for that agreement in order for us to proceed with what remains to be done. As I mentioned before, that site is operational, the fence is in place, the tower's up, everything is running. But there is a retaining wall that we got to build, and we have to redo the access road that goes up a steep hill. We can't do that until we have agreement from the city of Iowa Falls. So we continue to do that. I had asked for a report for attempts to move forward, and from September to now we have about 20 attempts so far, and it's just not quite moving the way we would like to see it. So. We're considering some other options. We'll keep you informed, but right now, that's the only holdback for the Hardin site. We are wanting and willing, but we need to have that agreement in place to keep us from getting in trouble. The Rock Rapids site, we were planning on doing that this week, and then we found out that there's a major fundraising for IPTV up in that area. So we're holding that, and we're going to reschedule that for next week. So we plan, the snow has melted away, so if the temperatures dip again, that's actually okay, because then the ground will become hard, because the big issue was the temperature increase, which was great to melt all the snow, but then it turns into very soft soil, which for heavy equipment is a big problem. At least all the mounds of snow are gone, so we're hoping for it still, we were still looking at it, it was still kind of wet but workable. So we figured, well, maybe if it doesn't rain between here and next week, it'll actually even work out better. As I mentioned before, we only have 2 segments to do, and you wonder, well, what does that have to do with IPTV? The reason for that is that the last 2 segments are obviously the last 2 segments at the top of the tower, which means you got to remember that this is a twin tower. So we're about 30 feet away from the existing tower, which emits in the kilowatt range. So that means that for safety and OSHA regulations, we have to turn down the power for that transmitter. And in some cases, we might actually have to turn off the transmitter. So we can't do that because we'd be interrupting all the efforts that IPTV is taking on this week. But once that turns on, then we expect, if everything goes well, we're looking at starting Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. We'll start by adding the last 2 segments of the tower. We're done with the guy wires, so we have to, once we do that, we're going to plumb and tension them to make sure it's straight. And then we're going to start with the installation of the new antenna. So between that and tearing down the existing tower, it looks like it would be about a 3-week process to do that. Meaning that we don't see the coverage testing for those 2 counties, Lyon and Sioux County, starting until around the middle of April. So once we get that done, then we're going to restart that, and then we should be in pretty good shape. What remains beyond that is just a site walk. So we did a site walk at one of the sample sites. We did a ballistics door with the state. We did not shoot at the door to try it out, but you could tell the difference between the door. And it was windy last week, so some of us actually struggled to catch the door to shut it. So that was kind of a interesting thing, but we have that approved. So since last week, we've already installed 4 doors, and we expect another 4 doors to be installed between now and the end. We got 2 scheduled for today, 2 for tomorrow. So overall, that's going to start, we're going to start that process, and it's going to start moving quickly. So the rest of it is really, we're just dotting every I, crossing every T, making sure that the documentation is matching, that the sites are clean, that everything is in order. So when we walk the site, we walk out of the site, we're done. That site is classified as complete. We'll put in, which we didn't do for Story, but we're going to put in these signs that the state made for no trespassing. And then we'll just move forward. The rest of it is just walking the rest of the sites. That's all I had. Yes.
Melvin, I just want to point out and appreciate your patience, especially with the Iowa Public Television fundraising thing and working around that and rescheduling. I'm sure that's a little bit of a headache to get cranes and tower crews rescheduled for something like that, but those efforts certainly don't go unnoticed, and they are appreciated. So thank you for working with all the agencies involved.
Well, the project has been complex from day one. All sorts of complications, all sorts of challenges. And it's just one of those things that as we move forward, you can't, when you have a project of this size, you can't try to lock down everything up front and then deploy, because then it turns into a 10-year project. So we've been doing a lot of stuff in parallel, but the vision is coming together, right? We're pretty much there. I mean, the DPS has already moved operations on. DOT has been using some pieces of it. We've gotten a lot of good feedback. It's never perfect. You can always find a place somewhere where you don't have the coverage, but it's still a comparison to what was available to the state. It's been a huge, huge improvement. So we're excited to get to that point. We're like I said, we're pretty much, we're right at the edge. And the rest of it, I think, moving forward is really just going to be how the board interacts with all the different subcommittees and all the things that you'll learn in the process. A lot of fine-tuning of things, all of the events, following up after the events, what worked, what didn't work, and it's just going to be a lifetime of adjustments and making changes, and that's just how it is. So overall, it's been a pleasure, and I'll be here next month. So. But like I said, it's just right now, the weather's changing for the better, so that's good. So we're trying to hurry up and lock down everything else that remains. So.
Thank you. Next up, Jim Lundstedt.
Oh, David Barnett.
Sorry, I missed you, David. You're up next. Thank you. FirstNet AT&T update.
Good morning, Board. As you can see on the monitors in front of you, during the month of February 2020, we added 7 new towers. 3 of those are actually in 2 in Minnesota and 1 in Illinois, but sitting right on the line of the states to help out with both states. So for Minnesota and for Iowa, and then Illinois and Iowa. That now brings our total tower builds since the FirstNet's inception in 2017 to 180 new towers that we have built across the state of Iowa. And again, still have a lot more to go. And concentration, most of it again, is going to be in the southwest portion of the state, which will start coming online towards the end of this year. So during the next few months, what you'll see is kind of what is on the board now is sporadic sites just going up across the state while the main build is going on in the southwest, because those are brand new towers, and so it's going to take almost the full year for those to actually be built and come online. As far as coronavirus goes with FirstNet, I have personally reached out to Chair Lampe, and we have corresponded by email to let him know that anything that is needed from this committee or from the governor's office to please reach out to us, and we are here to support in any way that we can. So I just want to let you guys know that we are prepared for that, and I again have reached out to offer our assistance if needed. And again, if anyone on the board needs any assistance, please don't hesitate to reach out to me if there's anything that I can do from a FirstNet perspective to assist with your counties, agencies, or cities. Any questions for me? Thank you.
Thank you. Now your turn, Jim. Thank you.
Good morning. Report will be brief. Of course, focus of the federal government right now is on posturing for the COVID-19 response and trying to be active and accurate on the information that is shared. First thing I want to call to your attention is those of you who use GETS and WPS who may have the app. Our contractor, CSRA, has sent a refresh through for the app. When that happens, the app face turns to red, meaning you have the new app. You should make a test GETS call. My experience was that the stored information with my card data was lost in that update. This sometimes happens with an app refresh, but the app itself seems to work better on FirstNet phones. There was no substantive change other than some bug fixes, but if you do refresh the app, you'll notice that it's a red face says GETS and WPS, and you may need to re-enter your GETS card information. Related to that, we continue to message that WPS, Wireless Priority Service, is an important adjunct feature for FirstNet. While you have priority and preemption on a call within the FirstNet network, those calls that exit the FirstNet network either to a landline, to another wireless carrier, or to another service do not enjoy priority once they leave the network unless you have WPS invoked. That is an added feature that has to be ordered. We've actually had a couple of instances where people have heard me talk and they said, well, I dialed that feature and it didn't work. It actually has to be provisioned, so it's not something that happens magically. Two other quick things for you. Participated this week with the Cybersecurity Advisor and Protective Security Advisor, looking at a cybersecurity, either a cyber infrastructure session or a cyber resilience review in late April in Polk County. Efforts are being made to bring both the emergency communications, protective security, and the cybersecurity group together to bring information to task on that. Not much to report other than we had a very good session, laid the groundwork for some more collaboration on the IT side. Last thing I would call your attention to is I've been sharing some information, and I'm sure it's in your circles as well. There's an excellent graphic real-time map of COVID-19 that was created by Johns Hopkins University Center for Science and Strategic Engagement, CSSE. There are 2 rogue websites that have popped up that are ugly. You do not want to go there. There is a Trojan on the front page. Merely clicking on it to view the map is not a good place for you. So be sure to hover and cover and be sure you're looking at the actual Johns Hopkins map, not some other site. We are actively working to get those taken offline. It's not a matter of snapping our fingers and making that happen, but the carriers and the ISPs are aware, and we're making every effort to get that decommissioned. Any questions for me?
I just have
Yes.
I just have a comment
Yes.
on your WPS GETS
Yes.
comment and
Yes, ma'am.
FirstNet. And when we were in the lab at FirstNet there in Boulder, we proved that it doesn't work. A FirstNet phone calling any other carrier does not work when the system is overloaded. You do not get priority and preemption, regardless of whatever that other carrier may say they have. They're not interoperable. So you have to have a FirstNet phone. You have to call another FirstNet phone in order for FirstNet's priority and preemption to work.
Correct.
The only way you call other carriers is through GETS and WPS. And in often cases, you do not know the carrier of whom you're calling.
Absolutely.
So WPS and GETS is the only way you'll be able to communicate with an overloaded system.
Okay, thank you. We're doing a lot of background work. You'll hear some interesting things about where WPS is going in the next 36 months. There's some very significant lab work going on to enhance this beyond simply voice over LTE, so more to come. Any other questions or comments for me? And I apologize that I couldn't make the 911 council meeting this morning. I was caught up in another matter.
Thank you. Back to you.
Yeah, so the standards working group did meet. We discussed the standard that would be applicable to the use of the status board program. Sat down, we had about a dozen or so on the phone call and with the go-to meeting, and we even had some people that have not called in ever to a standards meeting, and made sure to take into account their feedback, because they were some very interested dispatchers and dispatch supervisors that wanted to provide feedback, so that all got rolled up into the standard. That standard was moved on to operations for review, and that's where it currently sits. Standards may not meet next month because our scheduled date on the 24th does conflict with a couple different things, including our regional training in Ida Grove, so we're either going to try to reschedule that or meet in April. And one of the topics of discussion in April would be possible use of alert tones and what we would want that to look like, or to at least start that discussion on the regional calls, so that the most important things get the alert tones. So trying to categorize and quantify that and qualify that. So if anybody has any feedback or interest in that, I would highly encourage you to dial in. Those meetings are posted on the Isicsb board calendar. We typically have a conference line established in a go-to meeting, so you can actually see the document being edited in real time. So that's the report.
Thank you. Control station update?
Yeah, back to me. Had some test calls yesterday. We had a couple of successful test calls, which was great. And that brings our number down to 10 PSAPs that have not been able to answer a test call yet. There's some interesting nuances with each one of those PSAPs. Some of them are actually tying in dispatch consoles to Isicsb in their mid-project, and that tie-in will be done when they're finished with that project. There's one that they just have to reconfigure one of the files on their dispatch consoles, and they're good to go. A couple others are awaiting on parts from a vendor to get things installed. All in all, if you take the number that we have that have not yet been able to answer test calls successively, we're at about 91% of all PSAPs being able to use Isicsb. If you factor in the 4 PSAPs that are tying in dispatch consoles now, and then the one where it's a simple redoing the configuration file, we're at almost 96% of PSAPs having access to Isicsb. And if you think back to our previous skip, that completely fulfills one of our skip goals. So I do want to thank everybody on the board and in our various committees for helping to make this happen over the last course of a few years. I remember when we were doing our skip back in 2017, the concept of having 95% of PSAPs in Iowa having a connection to Isicsb seemed like a pie-in-the-sky dream, and we're basically here. So I want you guys to know that that's awesome, and you deserve a huge pat on the back for that, so thank you.
Any other questions?
If I followed your numbers right, I think there's 5 that perhaps we don't know why they're
There's
unable
5,
to make a call? Or do we know why?
The 5 that have not yet been able to get at least started. One of them is awaiting on install because there's certain configurations that have to be done with that. If you think back to the 2 PSAPs we had issues with, where the vendor with the same nameplate had issues interfacing with their own equipment, they're working on applying those software fixes to those consoles and those radios. So that is something that is going to take a little bit of time on their part.
Yes, let me ask the question in a little different way.
Yes.
Are there any that we don't know why they
No.
are unable to make the call?
No.
Perfect.
There are no unknown unknowns at this. Well, I shouldn't say that. There are no known unknowns.
Knowns. Perfect. That was really the crux of my question. I worded it poorly. Thank you.
All right, we have nothing under old business, so we'll go on to new business. UGC?
Yeah, user group committee has met and reviewed and considered the 8 listed that I'll read off quickly. Applicants, if anyone on the board has an issue with conflict of interest, let me know and we can separate them out. But the applications to be considered today are from Avera Health, Avera Care Flight Level 1 access, Baxter Fire Department Level 2 access, Calhoun County Emergency Management Agency Level 2, Delaware County Communications Level 1, Des Moines Public Schools Level 2, Iowa National Guard Level 2, Safeguard Iowa Partnership Level 2, West Branch Police and Fire Departments Level 2. So with that, UGC brings as a motion to the board, recommend approval of those 8 applicants at those corresponding levels.
I'll entertain a second.
Bischoff?
Thanks, Michelle. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And opposed? All right, motion carries. Any comment from the gallery or anything else from the board today? All right, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Peter?
Peter, yep.
Thank you.